Hello, everybody. It's meteorologist Jacob Campbell here with the WeatherNow forecast. This is an extended version of the forecast that I did earlier. The link to that is in the top left-hand corner of the screen. Top right-hand corner of the screen right now, if you're interested in watching that. I'd suggest watching that because it has things like simulated reflectivity in it and just general things like that that I don't go over in this. And so it's kind of beneficial to watch both, but that's more for people who just want to know the weather. And this is more for people who like to know the nitty-gritty of things and are wanting like a longer video. So what we've got right here is this is the 500 millibar or 500 hectopascal. It measures it in hectopascal up here, but hectopascals and millibars are equivalent, so it doesn't matter. Geopotential height, so 500 millibar geopotential height, and it kind of just shows where your areas of high pressure and low pressure are. So you've got much higher geopotential height right here, which means your column of air is taller, or there's more air within it. Which means that it's going to be applying a higher pressure to the surface. So there's a high pressure system here kind of spanning around the southeastern United States, and an area of low pressure because the column of air here is shorter. So it's going to be applying less pressure to the northwestern portions of the United States. Now, because of this, it's just funneling hot air into this high pressure area from the Gulf of Mexico, some hot and humid air. And then over here, it's just channeling some really really cool and dry air from Canada, which is causing some very low temperatures in the area. Then in these areas where you see a very quick gradient in the geopotential height, this is where your frontal systems are. So we have a cold front right now stretching through most of the midsection of the United States, and we'll animate this forward a little bit. And you can see that this kind of just sits here, which brings us a more like daily chance of thunderstorms for these areas because it's kind of just sitting over, providing a source of lift for any moisture that's in the area. And so we'll move into the day on Friday here, and what we see an opposite kind of trend starting, which we'll really see it here in the day on Monday of next week. We have this area of high pressure here for the American Southwest, and then we've got an area of low pressure up here for the American Midwest, I guess. And it's going to be channeling some cooler air into the Midwestern regions and channeling some drier and warmer air into the Southwest over here. And all along this area, you could see thunderstorm activity. So we may see a very stormy week next week for a lot of the Great Plains in the Midwest. And then we'll see some record low temperatures probably for parts of Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Indiana, Wisconsin, and maybe Michigan, as this this area of low pressure just kind of sets up, funneling air in from Canada. And we can take a better look at that here on the 500 millibar wind speeds. And so what we see this area of high pressure channeling in. We can see where these like wind barbs are moving. It's just funneling in this warm, moist air from the Gulf. And then over here, you can kind of see the wind barbs funneling cold, dry air from Canada. And then we'll push into next week here. And what you see the opposite. So areas of Iowa, areas of Illinois, areas of Wisconsin and Minnesota are now seeing this airflow coming from the north, which is really going to cool things off for some of these areas, whereas the Southwest is seeing just air funneling in from the south, which is going to warm things up. And that just strengthens as we get into the day on next Wednesday. So we're a week out now. A lot of this could change by then, but this is looking like the pattern. It's also corroborated by the GFS. This is the European model. And so there's a lot of model guidance that's suggesting that this will happen. We're going to take a look at Cape here. So I made a comment in my video earlier that Wednesday could be a hail day. You could possibly see a higher risk for hail in the Kansas area. And now I kind of wanted to explain my thinking there. So we see that on Wednesday, there's not a whole lot of cape along the front that's going to move through, which means that your updraft potential is much lower, that would suggest that you wouldn't get hail. But what I was looking at when I said that is I was looking at, we're going to take a look at Wednesday here on the 500 millibar winds. So we see a strengthening in the wind here. Now the GFS, and I don't have that pulled up right now, but the GFS shows a little bit of a stronger airflow through this Kansas, Missouri region, which what that does, and you'll hear me say this a lot because it's a very important concept, higher wind speeds aloft tilt the updraft. And so what that means is that will help sustain an updraft. So while there isn't a whole lot of updraft potential, wind shear can essentially make up for a weak updraft, and also cape can basically make up for a weak shear when talking about tornadoes. But we don't have a whole lot of cape, and we do have a lot of shear, or at least a decent amount of shear. So we're going to mainly talk about the possibility of a hail threat for Kansas and Missouri. And so that's basically what you're going to look at. Now, I know I'm kind of jumping here. Actually, I won't jump. I'll go straight to the SPC. We see that there's this area of slight risk for today for the Minnesota and Wisconsin area. And we've got a marginal risk for severe storms stretching all the way up from Canada to about Nebraska and parts of northern Kansas. And then we have another marginal risk here for New Mexico and Texas. So the tornado threat is down to about 2% in both Nebraska and Wisconsin and Minnesota. And so that's because we have, here, let's actually take a look at that now. We have quite a bit of shear, but if we take a look at cape, our cape is more on the limited side, with the upper bounds of cape going to just about 2,000 joules per kilogram, which cape at that level is actually why they have a 2% risk for tornadoes and not a 0%, because you do have an updraft and you do have the wind shear, which could produce tornadoes, but it's looking more on the unlikely side. Wind is going to be the primary threat here, with a 5% spanning this New Mexico, Texas, part of the Oklahoma Panhandle, and then stretching from Nebraska all the way up to Canada, with a little embedded 15% here for Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then hail is a little bit less of a threat, no threat at all for hail actually here in the New Mexico, Texas area, and a 5% stretching from Nebraska all the way up to Canada, and a little embedded 15% here from Minnesota and Wisconsin. So we're going to switch gears now, and we're going to talk about temperatures. So temperatures right now, this is actually a little earlier. Here we go. This is closer to right now. Temperatures right now are toasty in the southeast, as we've talked about, with all of the Gulf air just kind of sitting in here. And then they are frigid for areas of Montana and Idaho, who are just seeing all of this Canadian air channeling in. And along these areas, we're seeing a cold front, which is really going to help sustain these thunderstorms that are going on in the midsection of the country. This is the perfect time, spring and fall, when temperatures are changing, the jet stream becomes unstable, and then you just have this band in the Great Plains in the Midwest that just get hammered by storms in both the spring and the fall. We're going to push into the day on Wednesday, and you can see that cold front advancing, which is going to bring more of a storm threat for that Kansas area, where we did see on day 3 here, we did see that marginal risk. And then day 2, it's also going to sustain this marginal risk, stretching from New York down to Kansas. And then we see that it's gradually cooling down as that cold front advances, before finally, near the end of the week, it will get down into the 50s and 60s for a lot of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. That warm air is still going to sit down here to the south as the high pressure system doesn't fully exit the region. And then we see the low pressure system off to the west start to make its way over to the east, finally forcing that high pressure system in the south out to sea, which will really bring a lot cooler temperatures for the Great Lakes, the Midwest, the Great Plains, and really most of the country is going to see quite a big cool down, with the exception of these more West Coast states. We're going to take a quick look here at temperature anomalies. Now, I want you to remember this picture. Temperatures in the Great Plains right now are up to 23 to 24 degrees Fahrenheit above average. And then in the Rocky Mountain states like Montana and Idaho, they're 15 to 20 degrees below average, which is absolutely insane right now. But let's go to the end of the week. It flipped. So we've got areas like Indianapolis here, especially with that little purple region, negative 16. So 16 degrees below average. It's really going to cool down next week for a lot of the Midwest and the Great Lakes states. Like I said, we could see record cool temperatures, whereas off to the west, with the exception of this little pocket here in Northern California and Southern Oregon, it is going to be toasty for them, with temperatures about 14 to 15 degrees above average in some areas, other areas averaging around 5 to 10 degrees above average. And that's a direct cause of the geopotential height changes and where the wind is being is coming from. So that's going to wrap up this video. I hope that you all enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you.